Today's webinar is free to all who are attending. It's on trends in hard floors. And what a great topic when we think about hard floors today. We're going to cover what you need to know about materials and cleaning systems. So a nice blend of topics to consider today with our panelists. And we do want to thank our sponsors, Americo, Ameripolish, and Gaussium. And we do have 3 commercials to share with you during the webinar. So you'll be able to see what these sponsors have to offer you as you do your work. We have Jim Manis, Bob Merck, and Bill Griffin, and we can move on to our next slide and just talk about what we're going to do today. I'm your moderator, Jeff Cross. We want to make sure everyone on our webinar today is familiar with CMM Magazine, Cleaning and Maintenance Management Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you can go to cmmonline.com and subscribe and stay informed. With us today, the people you will not see, but they're part of the program running in the background. Martha Schmidt is the ISSA Virtual Events Producer, and Kathleen Misovic is the CMM Managing Editor, both handling the running of the webinar, the questions, and organizing things. So if you hear us talking to them, you'll know why that is, even though you may not see their faces. As we get started, again, remember to put in your comments, your questions. You can use the Q&A feature, the chat feature as well, and we'll have a couple of chat questions as we go through this. So be ready to engage. We want you to watch, pay attention, and learn, but also be part of this with your comments you can type in. Everyone will receive this via email. So if you registered for the webinar, and if you can't attend live, well, you're not listening to me right now, but you will get a link to the webinar. So you can share that with others in your organization. It'll also be on the CMM website, so you can see it there. So you will receive this in a few days, a link to the webinar. Feel free to make noise. Everyone's muted except our panelists and myself. And I think that covers that nicely. But again, remember the Q&A and chat feature. We want to hear from you as we go through the presentation today. I want to mention too, besides CMM as a magazine for you professionals, ISSA would like to invite you to join the family at ISSA. You can visit issa.com or email membership@issa.com. We are the Worldwide Cleaning Industry Trade Association. So everything you need from a trade association, we are the one for you. So be sure to look up and investigate if ISSA would be a good fit for you. I'm going to tell you it is, but you want to look us up and check us out. And we have our first sponsor message. Did you all feel like you wanted to dance during that? I felt the, yeah, good music. So that's our first sponsor. Thank you, Gaussium, for sponsoring our webinar today. Our panelists, as you can see on screen, we're very small little boxes, but here we are. I'm pleased to welcome Jim Manis. He's the National Director at Shaw Industries, handling the Shaw Total Care Program. Bob Merck is the owner of Kettle Moraine Professional Cleaners. So Bob is out there in the trenches doing his work. And then Bill Griffin is the president of Cleaning Consultant Services. All 3 great experts. They've been there, done that, and they have information to share with you today. So we look forward to their input. Being that there's 4 of us on screen, we may talk over each other a little bit here and there, but enjoy the information, and let's officially get started with our first topic. And our first topic is a chat question. So all of you who put in your name or where you're from, you know how to do this, but we want to know how long you've been in the industry. How long have you been cleaning hard floors? And this will just tell our panelists what they're dealing with. Ray's been here for 20 years, Angela for 6. Let's see who wins the contest. Right now, it's going quick. 33 is the top number, 35, 40.
55.
I missed it. It's going quick. So 55 is a winner, Bill?
So far.
60.
Oh,
60
look,
years.
60's got somebody in there now. Is that true?
And fit to clean. I love it. 60 years, fit to clean.
Great.
All right. So I think we see lots of good experience. And feel free, folks, as we're talking about these topics, if you have a thought, if you have a tip to share, put it in the chat. Just share it with everyone and that'll help. So thank you all for telling us how long you've been in the industry. We have some newbies and some old timers with us today, folks. So, all right. Good chat question. So what we're going to do is just talk about a little bit of history to start us off because things are changing quickly. So we're going to go to our panelists. Each of them can offer their thoughts on this, but talking about the history of hard flooring material. What are some of the more noteworthy trends? What's new? What do we need to know right now? And Jim, you know, from the manufacturing side, I'm going to start with you on this. Share your thoughts on what you've seen and what you know as far as trends. What do you have to share?
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having us on today, first and foremost. But, you know, trends, I always find trends in flooring to be rather ironic. And what I mean by that is if you just take a brief journey through history as we went from dirt floors to stone floors to wood floors, and then eventually to floors like this beautiful mosaic that you're sharing with us on screen. Today's trends, you know, and this was obviously happened over a period of thousands of years, but today's trends typically try to emulate those natural stone, natural wood. If you look at all the patterns that are present in the offerings by all manufacturers today, many of them are trying to emulate those original hard surface flooring. So I find it kind of ironic that the more we change, the more we stay the same.
Good point. And I like that we're trying to be as natural as possible. Keep that natural look. That makes
At least by looking that way, right? But clearly the technology is exploding. So that's the trends that we see day to day from all manufacturers.
All right. And Bob, let's go to you next.
So from a cleaner's perspective, when we talk about trends, we talk about the low maintenance, carefree floors, ones that require no finish or treatments or conditioners in order to maintain those. So the simplicity of maintaining them make them very user friendly. Unfortunately, some of our customers feel low maintenance means no maintenance, and that's where we come in as cleaners to bring those back up to spec.
Makes sense. And Bill, I know you're burning to say something.
Oh, you know, I just was listening actually, but you know, just a couple of comments. I guess, you know, these days they can make the floor look like anything, and it's not really what it looks like generally. And again, it's not just everything's changing. You know, everything from the processes, the chemicals, the frequencies, the reasons we do things. So you really have to stay on top of what's going on these days because what you're working on may not be what you think it is, at least from first glance. And there's probably more to the story than you really know. And so I always recommend, you know, trying to get the installation specifications, the care and the care information and the warranty information on any products that are new going into the facility, and to find it if I can and keep that document for reference in the future, because a lot of the problems have nothing to do with what we actually are doing on the floor itself. There's other issues involved before we get to it that play a big role in the maintenance of them, also in the cost.
Okay, very good. As we move on, we'll look at some of the issues that are facing those attending the webinar, those in the field, identification and challenges. So here, the questions you see on screen: how important is it to identify various materials? What do we need to know? Which ones are most challenging to clean and maintain? And Bob, let's start with you here. From your experience, how would you analyze this?
Well, Bill said it correctly. At all costs, if you can find out what you're dealing with either from the homeowner or the facility guy, you really have to know what the product is, and then even do further follow-up to find out what the manufacturer's recommended cleaning procedures. Because these floors look so much like other floors, you can have a porcelain that looks just like wood. You can have a laminate that looks just like wood. And you don't need a contractor coming in there, which this is a true story, comes in there and decides to sand a LVT floor because he thought it was wood. So identification is the very first thing to do before maintaining any floor. And you have to really go to great lengths to determine what you're dealing with.
So you're saying sanding an LVT floor is not a good idea?
Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you, Jeff. I should have told you before you did that, but you know.
So this is great, though. You did that one time.
Yes, it only takes one mistake,
One
right?
time.
And then over wetting and over washing on some of these wood floors and like wood products, you know, you get the raised grain and the ends are starting to split, and they just don't know the proper maintenance procedures. And how can you if you don't know what you're dealing with?
Yeah, good points.
Yeah, amen, Bob. I would chime in there as well that, you know, I'll give the audience a little bit of homework is, do you know the local representative on the flooring that you are attempting to clean? Do you have a relationship with that manufacturer? It just takes a moment to get to, I call it kind of forensic cleaning, to do your background work, do your homework, figure it out. You know, when I look at these pictures, obviously we have a subfloor issue there with some badly damaged gypsum. And you really need to know that site supervisor, that engineer, whoever that is on site, and get the details, get the background, find out what they're going to give you a lot of information. Yes, Bob.
I'm just gonna raise my hand like I'm in school because.
You can just talk, Bob. It's okay.
Sure. All right. So to bounce off of what Jim said, you can go visit all your local retailing floors. One, it's a great way to get to know these people, but ask them, what's new, what's coming down the pike, what's being installed now, what am I going to be cleaning in years down the road? And these people are a great resource. They might even give you samples so you know what you're dealing with.
They will gladly
Yeah.
engage you.
And then
Gladly.
furthermore, if a homeowner does not know what the floor is, I oftentimes will ask, well, where did you purchase it? Well, ABC floor covering. I might stop in there, drop the customer's name and say, hey, can you tell me exactly what I'm dealing with? You're building that connection with the retailer. You're going to get referrals from that retailer. And you can say to the homeowner, I did my research. I talked to the retailer. I know exactly what I'm doing. You can trust me.
All right, good stuff. And Bill?
Well, and just a couple of things, I guess, you know, one is, you know, your local distributor is always a good source also of information on products and equipment, and what's available, what's new with that, keeping abreast with them. Reading the articles in the magazines, taking classes. Those are all important things to do these days because the stuff changes so quickly. As far as actually doing the work, one of my tips that I try to recommend is test. You know, unless you put the finish down on the floor before, do a test in a small area. And you don't need to do a whole room to test something. You know, sometimes when I'm testing things, I'll use a cotton swab just to make sure, you know, what's going to work and what I'm going to get as a result. And then I'll go bigger from that. And pretty soon, hopefully, if it goes right, I'm doing the whole floor. But if you go in and slop things around and start treating it like what you think it is, and you haven't done anything to it before, you're asking for trouble. So keeping your body parts out of a wringer, the secret is test.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about how those watching this can learn about testing or identifying flooring materials. I know from my background in carpet care, you give me a butane lighter, I can tell you what it is. That doesn't work with hard floors, or does it? Jim, what do you think?
No, you're going to have to do your research. You're going to have to, again, have relationships. I think as Bob and Bill both said, you know, that's so important to understand the chain of custody, let's call it, from manufacturer to actual you getting a phone call wanting to clean that product. You know, a little visual inspection, obviously the access points, registers, things like that, you can quickly use those. I always carried, it sounds kind of nerdy, but I always carry a small microscope with me because I can go and get in there and really drill down to figure out exactly what I'm looking at and what I'm dealing with. Just a $30 handheld microscope can give you a lot of insight as to what's going on with that floor and what to do and but what not to do. I think it's so important. You know, we all learn in our classes, inspect to know what to expect, right? But I think in many cases, many of these hard surface floors were using one chemical or one procedure or one piece of equipment to kind of broad brush, broad stroke all of these. And they do require those little shades of gray to, you know, to finesse those. Some might respond better than others to different things.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, in your work, how often do you feel you need to know what the flooring is? Is it more of a, once you've been doing this a while, your experience, you just know it's what you can do? Or is that not the way to do this?
It's really not the way to do it. Even to this day, you should test. Even with all of my experience, I walk in, I think I know what I'm talking about. I've had to bend over already and feel a porcelain tile that would look like wood to make sure it wasn't wood. So, for example, natural stone, usually going to be softer and you can scratch it unless it's granite. If it's anything in the marble family, it'll etch with a little acidic product because of the minerals in it will etch. So grout will etch as well. It's cementitious. It'll also etch, and etching means it's dissolving material. So if you want to test a floor, put a little acidic product on the corner of the tile. If it fizzes up, well, then it's something that's probably natural. If it doesn't, it could be ceramic. If the grout etches, it could be cementitious. If not, it could be epoxy or some other form. So many surfaces scratch and some don't. So you have to kind of find out. Believe it or not, one of the more challenging floors to identify through testing, and Jim might be able to lend to this, is your LVTs, because it's just pretty much all visual. And he had mentioned open up the heat register, look at the profile of it and see if you can see the layers that are there so you get an idea that this is a man-made product. When an installer installs flooring material, you've paid for that. Any leftover material belongs to the homeowner. So normally they will have leftover material. So go take a look at that, look at the box that it is in. But testing, when you talked about, do I need to know? Really what I want to know is anything I'm going to do, is there anything I'm going to do that'll damage it? If I cannot identify it, then you go through the steps. Okay, neutral cleaner, mild abrasive pad, no negative consequence. High alkaline cleaner and abrasive pad, negative consequences. So you go through the steps, starting with the least abrasive chemical and pad to reach your objective, i.e. a clean floor. And then, so sometimes if you don't know, you can at least still clean the floor with safe procedures. And I don't know if that answers your question, Jeff.
It does. No, good information. So you can't assume. We have some who've been doing this 50, 60 years, and they know a lot, but you need to really do the testing. It makes sense.
Well, even with that, with the LVTs, when a homeowner puts on a floor finish, you got to test for the presence of a coating. And so, even though you might think you're dealing with something that doesn't require a certain product, they put it on. And so you have to know those things as well.
Yeah, again, that background is really important. Just to pile on what Bob said, if you, for example, were to put a 175 with a blue pad or any other color pad other than white or red, you will permanently damage most LVT floors, most luxury vinyl plank floors. Many people do not know that. They treat it like VCT. They put polishes, finishes, sacrificial finishes, whatnot. Not necessary, and usually will be have a negative long-term effect on that floor.
All right. Well, thanks, folks. Let's move on to our next topic and talk about the science of cleaning. So, just thinking about the big picture from our panelists here, what are some of the big issues when it comes to cleaning? I think I hear when I work on our media brands, I hear of grout as a big one. That's what else? Let's start with you, Bill.
Well, I just want to go backwards one step first before we do that. One of the tests that I like to do is the tap test. Take a quarter or something like that and tap on the surface. Usually that gives you a pretty good idea whether it's a hard floor or a softer floor. The other thing is, look at the chemicals. There's lots of different chemicals. People can put different coatings on the floors. It may not be what the manufacturer puts on. These days, the LVT type products, some manufacturers recommend a coating, or you can put a coating. Others say don't do it. And usually it's the chemical that you're using to remove those coatings that causes a problem. Too much moisture and too much alkalinity or acidity on something. The other thing, I guess, the testing, I always try to do that in a corner or out of the way place. So if I make a mistake or there's some kind of a visual problem, it's not going to be visible to everybody. I don't want to be doing it in the middle of the floor. And if I got somebody standing over my shoulder, I ask them, hey, can you get me a glass of water? I'm kind of thirsty here. And then that's when I do my testing and move around a little bit so they can't follow me all the time.
Very sneaky.
The other thing is the heat. Jim was mentioning the pad. It's just not the abrasiveness of the pad, also the temperature. If you're burnishing some of these floors and you get the floor too hot with too abrasive a pad, or just a pad that gets too hot, you can get some surface damage. They're a lot more sensitive, I would say, these days than they used to be. And I would just finish up one thing here. One of the things I do is a lot of inspections on floors. I probably do 30 or 40 a month of inspections of floors once they're installed, for manufacturers and consumers and contractors. And I would say that probably 80% of the problems that we run into relate to installation, or more, maybe 90%. So it's very important that these floors be installed properly. if you're going to get them to last. Otherwise, you get all kinds of problems. And then we're standing there, the last person on the floor, and the last person on the floor usually the one who gets blamed for it, and may have nothing to do with actually what caused the problem. So having an understanding
Absolutely.
of all those issues is very important.
Good stuff. So what about our challenges that we deal with? What do you three hear about the most when it comes to complaints or concerns? Jim, what do you hear from the manufacturing side?
Well, when my phone rings, it's usually on hard surface flooring. We're gonna be looking at typical post-construction dust that has been mopped in using wet methods. And then of course does what it does. It bonds well and it finds all the small little nooks and crannies and it stays there. And then the second one is going to be the haze. It's going to be improper cleaning procedures, chemistry, no rinse and removal. And then we get a phone call saying I've got haze all over my floor, or I can see all my footprints. And those are, I'm surprised, Bob and Bill, we didn't even talk about dry soil yet, because if you want to ask me what the biggest deal is, it's upwards close to 80+% of the total soil load of every floor, but we spend 80+% of our time talking about wet methods. And we need to really focus in on that dry soil, both capture with matting. But secondly, the biggest part of a cleaning job is that dry soil removal, only followed after that with water or wet.
Yeah, Maurice Dixon used to say the only reason we wet clean the floor is to remove the soil we couldn't during the dry soil removal process. So you are right, that's upwards of 80%. So what happens there, Jim, is homeowners aren't doing that dry soil removal. They're improperly using the microfiber mopping systems, and they're spreading the soil out evenly throughout the whole entire floor. So they get more aggressive with the cleaner, then all they're doing is spreading the dirt and leaving the residue. One of the tests you can do to determine if there's a residue buildup is if you just simply take a couple of fingers and drag it across that floor, you'll see your finger marks as you're removing the residue when you're moving that through. So dry soil is important, and the homeowner needs to know that as well.
I use a couple of really high-tech tools. They're very, very expensive. One is a lint roller. One is a lint roller. And that's going to tell me I can quickly, if you ever want to sell a job, here's all you got to do. You got to buy a 99-cent lint roller, and you got to go in the front door. You need to roll it on the floor and say, I can make this better, because it'll turn very dark very quickly. The other one, especially for drywall dust, post-construction, joint compound, etc., is going to be take some black electrical tape, wind it around your fingers so the sticky side is out, and start dabbing that floor. And you will quickly see all the residue that might not show up on a white lint roller. So those are
He's looking for his lint roller.
I would just dab that on this, just like so.
Good tips. Yeah, that's.
I've got a tip I would add there too.
Okay.
It's actually a tip. One thing too is the moisture issue. Over flooding or putting too much water on the floors. Depending on the type of, it all depends on where we started. What are you working on? If you put water on a wood floor, you're probably going to have some problems. Whereas you put it on ceramic, it's probably one of your best friends. So moisture can be a friend or an enemy in the process. And I liked the comments about, catching the soil in the first 25 or 30 feet of the floor. I think it was Michael Berry who had a story about the answer to cleaning is not cleaning. The answer to cleaning is prevention. So the more, I always say, if you can catch the soil at the door, you can pick it up with a shovel. But if you let it get throughout the building, you need tweezers to find it. And it's also very damaging to the surface. And my favorite tool is a white cloth and a little bit of carpet spotter, and just rub that on the floor with the grain, and then take a look at it, because it will show real quickly whether there's soil on that floor. And it's amazing. Sometimes people complain, oh, this floor isn't cleanable. Well, not the way you're not cleaning it isn't cleanable, but if you start actually cleaning it on a regular basis and preventing the soil from getting there, then you'll be able to maintain your floor.
It's interesting that sometimes the best answer is the simplest one.
That's
Remove the
what-
dry soil, prevent it.
Yeah.
So these guys are talking about testing, and I'm a big proponent of testing. I use the lint roller, the one and the tape one, and all of those different tests. I learned many, many years ago that a sales presentation without a demonstration is nothing more than a conversation. Now that's something Nick Palella taught me years ago, and I used to ask customers, would you like a free demo? And they'd go, nah, just give me the price. Well, then I changed that word demo to test. And I would say, in order for me to give you the best possible price and have a clear understanding what I'm up against, I need to test the floor. Do you mind? And they'd go, oh, by all means, you have to test, you have to test. Well, in that test is your demo. You're learning from it because you're going to understand what it's going to take to get that job done when you actually come and do the work. So you're not wasting time at the beginning of the job figuring that out. And it shows the homeowner what you're able to do.
Yeah, that word demonstration may sound like a sales pitch to some, I imagine.
It does, yeah.
Good points. But we need to move on for time's sake because we want to do our Q&A before we get to the top of the hour. So we have a chat question, and this will help also with our Q&A part. So all of you on our webinar, in the next few minutes, you don't have to do it right now, but as we go through our presentation, share some of the mistakes you've made with hard floor cleaning and maintenance. And you might have to think about that a bit, but as you populate the chat with these things that you faced and mistakes you've made, and you're not going to be anonymous to the panelists, but we won't mention any names either, right? Jim, Bob, and Bill. We will not mention names if they put an embarrassing experience in the chat. So anonymous it is.
Can
Well,
you
thank
talk
Kevin for
slower?
his-
I'm trying to write all this down, Jeff.
I'll thank Kevin for his post.
Very good. So let's move on and we'll see what people put in. Avoid expensive mistakes. So let's get big picture here. We think about our audience and what the work they're doing. What are some common but expensive mistakes they should know about? Besides what we've talked about, I know we've covered a few.
I have one.
Go ahead.
I don't know, it's actually a mistake, but on the cleaner's part, it kind of follows up with what Bob was saying about the demonstration. That there's a saying that says, what you say before you do the work is called education. What you say after you've done the work is called an excuse. And the more education you do, the less excuses you'll have to make. So I think one of the mistakes is that not telling the customer or preparing the customer for what's reality of what you can and can't do with the floor. And then, go forward. And sometimes realizing you should walk away from the job. Not all jobs should be done. If they want you to make a new floor out of a dirty old beat up floor, you're probably not going to have a happy customer when you get done anyway. So knowing when to pack up your bags and say, listen, I know this guy down the street, you guys will get along real well, and refer them to somebody else. The worst guy in town is what I would say, or gal.
No, that's a good one.
They deserve each other.
Yeah, there you go. Bob, what do you think?
I was reading one of the comments about,
Yeah, there's some good ones.
well, someone had mentioned about vinegar, and that is a problem, particularly in ceramic cleaning. Vinegar is an acidic product that attacks the grout and begins to degrade it, and it'll soften it to a point where it's going to damage that floor. Well, homeowners have been taught, oh, vinegar and water, clean with vinegar and water. Well, vinegar is an acidic, but most of the soils we deal with are also acidic. So we clean on the principle of pH balancing. That's why most of our detergents are neutral or slightly alkaline. And so using vinegar over and over as a cleaning agent can harm grout, it can harm natural stone, and it can harm some of these finishes on the pre-finished woods, the laminates, the engineered, and even some of the LVTs by constantly attacking those coatings with an acidic product. It may not happen today, may not happen tomorrow, but long-term use, vinegar can be detrimental. So there's my comment about expensive mistakes. And that's when a homeowner makes. But we can educate the homeowner.
Good points. Jim, how about you? I know you get phone calls, so.
Yeah, I mean, some of the most expensive mistakes are literally, to echo what Bob said, is things that we think are rather benign and not really, we haven't done our homework. We haven't studied to figure out what the soil load is, what it's consisting of, and then how to attack it. And I would say, one of the things that we have the luxury of is electron scanning microscopes. We can look at a surface of floor and, through very high microscopy, we're able to tell, has this floor been etched? Why won't it come clean? Well, I think Ray made a comment, no disinfectants, but post-COVID, I hate to even say those two words together, but let's just say that we are there. We're dealing with a lot of fallout from chemistry that was improperly used and applied that has permanently damaged floors, both soft and hard. So you don't drink at the well of just your chemical supplier or just your equipment supplier, but connect with all parties to make sure everybody's on the same page. And that way, that what you're doing is, number one, it's going to have great efficacy, but number two, it's going to be safe and you're not going to buy a new floor.
Jim, what about neutral disinfectants on these floors? I know that traditional disinfectants always tended to be high in alkalinity. Is that the reason that we're shying away from
No,
them?
honestly, it drifts over to the acid side when we get into some of the quaternary compounds and some of the peroxide based products. Not to pick on any one in particular, but those are all acidic or carry a lot of residue and cause yellowing and things like that. If you come across a resilient floor that you cannot seem to get the yellowing out of in the main traffic patterns, and that yellowing proceeds to a carpeted area or another textile area, you've got quaternary yellowing. So, you know, we're seeing a ton of that now that we're in kind of the hangover phase of the pandemic.
We have to understand, according to Dr. Michael Berry as well, all cleaning cleans to the level of sanitization, and that, according to public health standards, is a safe environment. So oftentimes we don't need to use a disinfectant. Just cleaning to remove 50 to 70% of the germs on that surface is considered sanitized.
Well, and I think just as a follow-up, to be fair to our chemistry friends, because they are our friends, but we're not following the label directions. And almost every single one says final step is rinse and remove. And I guarantee you that that is done very rarely.
Mhm.
I guess
Yeah,
this
Ray
goes to
is,
it.
that's what Ray said in the
If you don't know
comments.
what you're working on, if you don't know what you're working on and you don't know what you're using, you know, and what you're trying to remove, you're probably going to have some issues with what you get as a result.
Yeah.
So doing
From
this
a
due diligence before you start is very important.
from a cleaner's perspective, using too aggressive of cleaning chemicals and pads because they think they're going to get in and out of there faster. Well, they're going to end up damaging that surface by using the wrong chemistry and wrong abrasives. So that's a mistake that cleaners can make. And then
Yep.
stripping floors with stripper.
I can't ignore this one comment from Eduardo. It's a great one, but here's how I do it, Eduardo, is if I'm worried about a chemical and leaving a residue, I'm going to go ahead and put a small dab of that on a window and I'm going to let it dry. And if it's clear and I can't see it, good to go. They truly are no rinse. But I have not seen one yet.
Yeah, the other technique, you can put it on a plate, and if it dries to a powder that can easily be blown away, that residue can be removed with a vacuum or some other way. But if it's sticky, then it's a bad residue.
Yeah, I vote yes to Jim's though. I like that window idea because you will see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Haven't heard that one before. Let's move on. We'll talk about more mistakes in our Q&A as well, but we have another sponsor message to consider. Enjoy.
Since 1969, Americo Manufacturing Company has been innovating high-quality, effective floor care products manufactured with pride in the USA. Headquartered in Ackworth, Georgia, we offer a full line of floor pads made from 100% recycled PET fiber and natural content. We combine American-made quality with tested sustainability technology, giving you the confidence that clean floors need not come at the cost of our environment. Visit our website to learn more about Americo's commitment to sustainability, green cleaning, and a cleaner way forward.
And we thank Americo for being a sponsor as well. So let's talk about productivity tips. We have many on our webinar who are managing staff, managing teams. What can they do? What are some tips you can share to do more with less time, less people, to save time and increase profitability? And let's see, Bill, we haven't heard from you for a minute. Let's go with you.
A whole minute, huh?
Whole minute.
A whole minute. Okay. Well, I guess, you know, just when I was thinking about that, one of the things is, again, is to get all your equipment, all the products you need together and take them with you at one time. You know, make sure you got kind of a list to take with you, especially if you're doing route work where you're going out and doing work in different areas. Even on a campus, you can have a cart that you take all the things around with you. So if you get there, you got what you need. And also kind of a checklist to go in and a checklist to go out so you don't leave anything behind. You know, you don't want to do a good job and then have the customer call and ask, why'd you leave the mop on the floor last night here in the room? So that's one productivity tip that I would suggest.
I like that one. That's one that I believed in when I had my company. Trips to the truck didn't pay.
Yeah. Well, worse is if you have to go 50 miles back to get a drive assembly you left somewhere on a dock, you know, when three guys in the truck at the same time.
No one here has ever done that. No.
No, right, I'm sure.
All right. So Bob, what do you say? What do
Well,
you do to do this?
Couple of things as it relates to increased productivity. You can look at the robotics for sure to reduce the amount of actual man hours and have robotics doing it. I don't know that their price point is there for everybody yet, but this is the wave of the future. Bouncing off of something Bill said about the getting your stuff organized. I worked with a company recently where he couldn't figure out why he wasn't making any money on these jobs. He'd have 6 guys come to the shop, 6 guys load up the vehicle, and 6 guys go to the job site. Well, that's a lot of man hours. If that takes an hour, you got a lot of man hours into that job. What we do here is we have a prep and landing team. This is a team of 2 that come into the shop. They get everything ready. They get to the job site. They do the, safety procedures and perimeter and whatnot. And they set everything up. And then the crew starts showing up, whatever I deem is appropriate, a half hour, 45 minutes after we're there. And they jump on a machine and they're working right away. So I've just eliminated 3 guys that would be standing around basically doing nothing anyway. So look for those production killers and those wasted man hours. Edge cleaning, for example, get an edge cleaning, go mechanical, find whatever tool you can get that increases your productivity. And I hear this all the time. Oh, those things are $1,000. Those things are $1,600. Yeah, but what's the return on your investment? How many hours are you going to be reducing on these jobs? And it'll take no time to pay for that piece of equipment. Plus, it'll make your employees much happier because they're not doing corners and edges on their hands and knees with their face right next to that chemical where it shouldn't be. So look to the advances of the chemical and the equipment side of the business and understand that don't have people standing around doing nothing. Jeff, I think you're on mute.
You're muted, Jeff.
Yes, I was on mute.
We hadn't heard from you for a couple minutes, Jeff.
Couple of minutes. So Jim, what do you say? Anything to add, even though you're not out there doing the work?
Well, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask because even though I ran crews and trucks and all that, that's been a while ago. And whenever I do a project around the house, I allocate half the time to find the stuff that I didn't put away properly to begin with. So that would be my advice, is to be disciplined and put everything where it's supposed to be at the end of every job. So at the next one, you can quickly locate it. I've yet to conquer that monster in my own personal life, but we can always try for tomorrow. But I think Bob and Bill hit the nail on the head here.
Yeah,
Very
always organize your custodial closet, your floor van, your equipment at the end of the shift. Don't think you're going to do it the next day because that next day never comes. You have to do it at the end of the job. Everything's cleaned up and put back. Our vans are very neat and organized. At a glance, I can tell, is my pad driver in there? Is my long handle tools in there? Everything should have its own place.
Good tips.
I got another one I've just mentioned here too, is that don't base the frequency on the type of surface only. It should be based on the actual needs of the area. And that can change throughout the year, throughout the week, or throughout the month. That's a far more sustainable way than just saying, well, I got VCT and I'm going to put finish on it twice a year or something. I think that's an incorrect way. We kind of micro do these things and color code them. We need to on a map of the layout of the building so we kind of know what we should do when, and realizing it can change constantly.
I think too, for the audience, something that unfortunately, that consultative sales approach has got to be there, because if you're constantly restoring a facility versus maintaining one, that, you might want to restructure your bid to be in there more often and be more of a maintain it versus having to restore it and dig deep in order to get that thing back to an acceptable condition. So I think that's one of the things that I know I struck a nerve. Bob, go.
Yeah, in this chemical sensitive world that we're living in, it's easy to explain to the customer that maintenance is much more environmentally friendly than restorative because we're not using the aggressive products and pads that we have to for those systems. And what we have gotten away from is setting any kind of a specification that says 4 times a year, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We just simply say, listen, we are going to maintain that floor to the level of your expectation. And then that gives me the freedom. Do I need to scrub and recoat? Do I need to just strip? Can I use an auto scrubber? Or do I use a single disc? But internally, we know what it's going to take to keep that floor looking nice. And we always want to reach to the level of maintenance. There's 2 types of cleaning. There's keep up and there's catch up. Well, keep up is a lot easier than catch up, and it's far less expensive.
Good tips. Let's move on to our next topic and discuss fixing stuff. In a minute or two on this. Is there anything we can do about chemical residues? In fact, I know a couple of our questions that we have from participants here will talk about chemical residue, but what about scuff marks, scratches, things like that? Flooring types that you can actually repair. I imagine wood is the number one.
Yeah, wood and vinyl.
Yeah.
Again, a light abrasive pad, isopropyl alcohol will do magic on paint, grease, gum, tar, scuffs, things like that. You don't need to go nuclear with it. If you're looking at a true scratch where you've gotten through the actual picture and you're down into the wear layer of the flooring, or past the wear layer of the flooring, excuse me, then you're going to have to add back in both material and color. We teach that. It's real easy. But I would say that, you know, most of the repairs that we see are, at least in my world, are going to be on the resilient and hardwood laminate side. And those are relatively easy. I can link up a video to share with the audience if that's desirable.
Okay.
I just, one of the things I would say about on the repairs, you'd be surprised actually, if you do a little digging around on the internet, I think almost any floor covering can be repaired in some way. And there's just lots of resources out there. You can, whether it's ceramic tile or wood, it just does take a little bit of practice to do that. I did have another tip. I wanted to go backwards there a little bit. Don't put floor finish where it doesn't belong. If you're doing floors that have floor finish on them, you know, you don't always need 6 coats, and nobody walks along the walls and around pillars, you know, and if you got a storeroom that's just on the 30th floor of the building, you don't need 6 coats of finish, and you don't need to strip it. Probably you just need to burnish it, maybe put down a coat of finish on top of that, or just burnish it and leave it alone. So again, alter your process there, and don't bid things blind. There's chances people go, oh, well, I don't need to look at it. They just want a strip and wax job, so I'm going to give them this price. You know, if you can't get out there and look at it, if you're local, you deserve yourself to go out and close the job by looking at it and testing a little bit and knowing what you're getting into, so you don't bite off more than you can chew. And if you can't go there visually or in person, then use your phone. Tell them, listen, you got FaceTime, you got Google Duo. What do you got on your phone here? Take me for a walk. Show me some of the corners. Show me your floors. Show me what's going on in the building. You know, at least you got some general idea, and that kind of tells you, like, do I need to go there and look closer? Or, hey, I think I kind of, and you can even have them do a little test. Hey, put a little detergent down and a little bit of, take a white rag and rub that corner for me and show me what you get. You know, get close, shine a flashlight on it. So there's lots of tricks you can do to make it more efficient and save time.
You might convince them to do the whole cleaning job. Who knows? But
Who knows?
Our next slide.
Yeah, real quick, bouncing off what Bill said is, even though, you know, many people go, well, I can't take the time to run and test this floor. Well, you're going to pay for that in the long run. First of all, you should always be able to make time. But if you can't, the first thing you do when you get to the job, while your crew is unloading, or even yourself, is you do that test right then and there. If you're scheduled to do that work that day, there's no law that says you can't test it before you start. If there's any red flags, stop production. Hey, listen, we got some problems here we need to discuss, instead of just going at it blindly. And then Bill, everything else Bill said was spot on, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
That's because I learned it from you, Bob.
Yeah, right. I read your book, buddy.
Let's
blame
move
me
on
now.
to our next topic and spend a moment just talking about what we can expect with robotic cleaning technology. It's already out there, but what do you three see? Maybe just one quick comment from each of you, because we're about to our Q&A section part of our presentation. So Jim, what do you see?
You know, it's ever present, it's ever growing, and I'm of the mind that we need to just assess it and measure it and make sure that we're using diagnostics to see. That's a wonderful maintenance tool. I don't know whether that's going to be a deep cleaning opportunity, but again, I think it's something that we need to continue to measure and see the effectiveness of that particular equipment.
And Bob, I know that you are always looking for good workers. Could robotics be part of the solution for you?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. And no disrespect to some of the workforce that's out there, but these machines very well could do a better job. Unfortunately, we tend not to full vacuum floors anymore, even all the hard ones, which we should be vacuuming all floors, not just carpeting. And so these define the definition of cleaning by identifying, packaging, locating, and containing. It's containment that is the most important. And so they could do a better job than some technicians, because the technicians usually don't have the time because they're filling in for somebody else that didn't show up. And so just real quick, I wanted to just show this. This here is a Sidewinder tool, and it's used with a backpack system. I can vacuum an 8-foot wide corridor just as fast as anybody can use a dust mop. Plus, I don't have to worry about all the soil I missed, and I don't have to pick up the pile when I'm all done and clean out my dust mop. I just change the bag when it's full. So I think vacuuming is the way to go. And robotics, the comment I have about that is the price point is going to get there for all of us eventually.
All right, good stuff. And Bill, we'll wrap up this slide with you.
All right. Bob's got a good point there. Anytime you use a vacuum, on whether you're doing it wet or dry, you're going to get more thorough removal than any other process. That's just the way it is. Because get some cracks and crevices in place you can't get otherwise with a mop. As far as robotics, it's rudimentary at this point. If you kind of think about the car that was back in 1909 or something, when they invented the first car, or the Wright brothers and they flew the first airplane, that's kind of where we're at with robotics now. But it's changing far faster than anything else has in the past in the cleaning industry. When I went to the trade show, I guess I can mention Interclean in Amsterdam, as well as the ISSA show. Last year, when I went there 3 times before, there was like 1 or 2 robots. Then there was like the next year, there was like 15 robots. Last year, there was almost 50 robots at the show. So, you've got to stay on top of what's going on. They take a lot more babysitting. They aren't really ready for prime time totally yet, but you can't afford to not get involved in the process and move yourself along. It'd be like working without a phone in the future. So you're going to have to go there sooner or later, one way or the other.
And many people look at robotics as a tool that you have to leave at the account. If you're a route cleaner, you've got several medium-sized buildings, 20,000 or less square feet. There's no law that says you can't take this to job to job to job. You can program them for many facilities.
One day they're going to drive the car there and get to work on their own. One day.
Well, something will drive the car there for us, for the truck.
Or host a webinar.
Yeah, maybe we don't even have to go there.
We're all going to be out of a job.
It's
No.
Technology. You just got to stay in touch with what's going on.
That's right.
Or you'll get left behind.
You know what it is, you embrace it, you use it, and it works.
It may not
Let's
be
look at our
appropriate
last
for you
sponsor
today.
message so we can get into our Q&A. So Martha, if you'll tee that up. That's a pretty good looking grocery store.
Yeah, I did a nice job.
Yeah, there you go. Let's go ahead and get into our Q&A. We have a lot of questions and we're not going to get through them all here, but what we can do is provide them to our panelists if they'd like to get back with some of the folks who asked these questions, or we'll put them maybe on social media as well. But we do have one that we had received before the webinar, and it's about transition areas. So Bob, I know these are your pictures. Let's go ahead and look at those. So Martha, you could tee up some of these, because some are concerned about when they're cleaning one surface, not getting any residues or overflow into other areas. So Bob, talk us through this.
What you're looking at here is the backside of a dam. And this is a technique in which you use that heavy duty vinyl tape. Now you can use duct tape, but might have a tendency to leave more residue. This is a non-residue tape. It's a heavy duty vinyl. And if you'll show the next picture, Martha, that'd be great. This is the front side of it. And what we have here is we put half the tape up the side of the block and the other half on the ground. And that works as a dam and retards any liquid from getting past it. It really does work. I've used it for many years. Next photo, please. And the next one. There you go. This is a homemade technique if you don't want to go out and purchase some vinyl tape or for whatever reason. This is just simply taking a bath towel, getting it wet. The water is important. It weights down the towel and it dilutes out any chemical that's being bled into it. just create a dam, and that keeps all that slurry on this side of the floor you're trying to clean. And then this is a commercial made dam. It's just an absorbent sock. You get it wet, you lay it down, and it works the same principle as the towel. And I think I have one more photo just to show you the diversity of it. No?
That was it? Nope.
Well, okay. Thought I had those rolled up towels, by the way. They'll work great for putting underneath vending machines around stoves and refrigerators in homes and sort of those sort of things. But you have to protect those transition areas. Many people will use a track off mat, which they'll lay on the other side. And I thought I sent you that picture as well. It's just a mat that you lay on the other side. Tape that down to that transition strip as well. And that'll prevent anything from going underneath and getting the other floor wet.
Good tips, Bob. Appreciate that. As we're on this topic, so Martha, you can remove the PowerPoint, I believe, at this time. We thank you for that. Let's talk about safety. And we didn't talk a lot about residential compared to commercial cleaning, but safety on both sides. What are some strategies you would share as about cleaning, especially when you're wet cleaning, and safety issues? Bill, can we start with you?
Yeah, I guess, just kind of being aware, what we want to look at from a safety perspective is what is the hazard? That's what you're doing, and how could you get hurt? That's the risk. So, you should be analyzing before you start any job, what's the hazard you're involved with and what's the risk. In our care, it could be anything from lifting to dust in the air to chemicals we're using. I had somebody told me they slipped and fell and hurt their arm on a wet floor, stripping a floor. Boy, that's like walking on greased ball bearings. And they slipped and fell and hurt their arm, but also they landed in the slurry, and then they forgot to take their clothes off. And so they got chemical burns in the process too. So, all the work, if you don't think about what you're doing, is fraught with hazards. So you got to think about what you're doing and think about what could happen, because you many times don't see what the real problem could be. You could hit your head and bleed out before anybody finds you in the morning. So you've got to be thinking about what you're doing and protecting yourself.
Yeah, that was a morbid thought, but real.
Yeah, but real.
Yeah. Bob, what do you think?
I agree with everything Bill said. That's why you keep your phone on you in case of emergencies. To set a proper safety perimeter, it starts days before the cleaning, when you should reach out to your client or homeowner to let them know you're going to be arriving on this day at this time, and point out all that keep people out of the work area, remove these contents, and anything that you can do to pre-warn them days ahead of time is going to be to your advantage to keep people out of the work area. Setting up a strong perimeter using placards, tapes, cones, whatever it is. And I'm just going to share this one tip. When you are blocking off a doorway, everybody likes to take that caution tape and put a big X on it so nobody walks right through it. That never keeps anybody out of the workspace. They walk right through it, they knock it down, so on and so forth. If your safety perimeter has been compromised, you can still be held liable, even though it's hanging on one side of the doorway. It's not intact, and therefore, whoever walked through it could just simply say, hey, there was no safety perimeter set here. Take your safety tape, your caution tape, tape it to the top of the door jamb and make a drape. Put about 4 or 5 of those in that doorway, about 4 or 5 feet down. They'll walk through that drape all the time, but they'll never remove or compromise your safety perimeter. And that's my tip there.
Good tip.
Did it make sense? Did I explain it okay?
Yeah, I think that's great.
I'm stuck to the tape.
There you go. And Jim, from your perspective, what do you think? Anything else that we should consider as far as safety?
Yeah, I think residentially, but moreover, slip and fall, I think, is still the #1 litigated issue in the United States court. So we clearly got to address that. Owner operator of a residential cleaning company for years. You got kids riding their bikes over your hoses and equipment and cords and no cones. You've got 200-degree water at 400 PSI and all the, these are situations that you need to take very seriously and make sure, echo what Bob and Bill said. Expect the unexpected and plan for that, because it will happen if you're not prepared.
In homes, people just don't realize how important it is to set that safety perimeter. You have grandma coming down to meet the kids who come home from school down the stairwells and steps on your wet ceramic floor, and boom, down she goes. Guess how I know that happened? Or you don't put a sign on the garage door. The husband comes home and walks through your finish that you have on the floor. He didn't know it was being done today. So you really got to set those safety cones, tapes and placards in homes as well as commercial.
And I think
Okay.
Bill touched on it earlier as far as the safety, but this, moving forward, 2023 and beyond, customers want to know what's in all those white jugs in your cart, in the back of your truck. You need to have that MSDS information right there. You need to have, everything clearly labeled. My generation always we didn't look at the back of the bottle. We looked at the packaging. We bought a bottle of wine because it looked cool, right? Today's customer, they want to know what's in it, what's it going to do, what happens if they touch it, what happens after you leave. So make sure that you are fully prepared for that.
We get asked that a lot, Jim.
Right.
So
That's
give me
actually an
a test.
OSHA regulation. If you have a product on site, you are required to have SDS sheets for them and provide PPE for the employees who use them. And the fines start at about $13,500 for each incident. Minimum.
That's pricey. All right, here's
That's
another
just the
question.
start.
Yeah. Let's move from safety to technical. Here's a question from an attendee today. What causes tiles to blister and how do you prevent it? I don't know who to ask. And who's going to take that one?
I don't know what floor surface we're dealing with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
says tiles.
I just, one thing I would say, don't overuse chemicals, do your testing. And then you can use, on a solid tile, you can use probably almost anything in a small area just to test and see, but don't let it go down between the cracks or the joints on these products. That's where the problem starts. And sometimes too, the floor is uneven and you got a corner sticking up and you hit it with a floor machine or hit it with auto scrubber or just people walking over it. Or if you got vertical deflection in the floor, you're going to get what looks like maybe bubbling, but it's not. It's really something else.
Well,
Good
you can
point.
get delamination from some of the laminates and from some of the multi-layered floors, the top coating, some of those things. But I must suspect you might be talking about floor finish, which usually means the finish was put on too thick. That could be one of the reasons.
Yeah, good points. Jim, from a manufacturing viewpoint, blistering this topic, any particular flooring type that's more susceptible to you?
The two questions kind of bleed together, but when we see blistering, let's say, for example, on a ceramic tile, one would probably think, well, that's a manufacturing defect, and they're probably not far off. It might not show up until you hit it with your 1200 PSI tile spinner or whatever, and you bring that out of the, but where we're seeing the biggest issues is on resilient planking in a commercial setting, and people are using their high pressure turtle tile scrubber wands to clean. These floors are not designed to take that kind of PSI. So yes, production is fantastic on those, probably does a great job, but it usually will clean off the finished wear layer on that product as well and may damage it even further. So do not use high pressure things. So we see blistering again. To Bob, what are we talking? I'm assuming ceramic tile, but the two questions kind of blend together in my mind.
Okay.
Well, that pressure washing of those LVTs is nuts. I get calls all the time about that, and the manufacturers don't recommend it, but there's one franchise out there, you'll see it on their commercials. They're actually using pressure washing techniques on LVT.
Sometimes too, the problem is moisture from below the floor. It looks like it's a bubble on the top.
Very,
but it's
very
really
much
something
so. Very much so,
coming
Bill.
up from below. And Jim's right. The heat issue, it can be sunlight coming through windows with no coverings on them, or even through a skylight. And you don't want to be using a steam iron on a stick, and you don't want to be spraying water on some of these floors. Bring out your mop as dry as you can absolutely get it. You don't want squirting water out straight on top of floors, specifically wood floors.
Kind of goes back to the original question, Jeff, that you asked about, like, what are we seeing? What are the trends? And, the cleaning industry in general has not yet quite caught up to the biggest growth category in the flooring industry, which is resilient. We're great on VCT. We're great on the historic memorialized products, but the new products, like this and others, we're treating them the same as everything that came before, and we need to really not do that. We need to really educate ourselves.
Good points. Well, we are at an hour, but let's do a few more questions. We still have couple hundred still with us on our webinar. So if you want to take a couple more, here's one that we might have touched on this a bit, but someone asked, once a VCT floor is hazy, what can you do to remove the film?
Hmm.
I don't
What's
know.
the cause?
Yeah, there's more questions that need to be asked than
Yeah.
answered. But
So if
hazy-
someone's still here to ask that question, you could maybe in the chat put more information, and
well,
I'll watch
hazy-
for that.
if it's during the application of the finish, it usually is an indicator that the coats were applied too soon. The
Moisture in there.
moisture has not evaporated from the layer you have down, and you're putting more finish on top, trapping that moisture, not allowing it to dry. For a
Hmm.
rookie, there's no rule of thumb. If it feels dry to the touch, wait 10 minutes and you know it's good to go. Because if there's moisture
And if-
trapped in that finish, it's going to haze out. Now, how do you get rid of that? Well, there's a couple of ways. You can try buffing or burnishing. One of the techniques I prefer is wet burnishing by taking a spray bottle of water, misting it in front of the burnisher, and attacking that finish. You might be able to get that haze out by burnishing it.
I
And if
think
it's
Kevin
mopping-
kind of hit the nail on the head here too with this wax on LVT flooring. The answer, no, you may not. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with somebody goes down the grocery store aisle. They see this finished restore product from to be determined manufacturer, whatever. They go ahead and mop that on, and then the floor shines brightly for a couple weeks, and then we start having haze issues. We recommend products that are lower pH strippers. We don't want something like All Safe or something in that 9 to 11 range is probably where we're going to target. Household, maybe a 1 to 4 ammonia and water for some of the just that soapy detergent buildup. And we don't want you to pour straight ammonia on any floor, but those are the typical the easy buttons as far as removing haze. You might have to use a spinner and agitate that floor to get that haze off there. But a lot of times, believe it or not, it's soap, it's detergent, and you're going to have to microfiber mop that floor multiple times. And my last thing, and I'll be quiet, is when you're doing that process, use distilled water, because a lot of times the haze can be coming from your water and not your chemistry.
Yeah.
It's easier on your equipment too, that distilled water. I want to just bounce off of something Jim said, if I may, please. This is a great opportunity for all of you people out there that do residential carpet, upholstery, and hard floor care. They've got the cutest little automatic floor scrubbers that are no bigger than an upright vacuum. They're electric, they're lightweight, you can move them around, but you can just go in and deep clean these LVT floors for that very reason that Jim expressed. They mop these floors with everything under the sun. They get this buildup of chemical and residue, and it leaves this disgusting haze. They continue to incorrectly mop it with their flat mop, and they can't get it all off. You go in there and you hit it with your little upright automatic floor scrubber. You're the hero, and you've got a great add-on, and the customer loves you. We have one of those in every truck, and they're upselling that service all the time.
Usually you're talking about residue in processes. If you got some kind of a haze on there, if you got a residue left behind possibly.
Bob, did you say cute equipment?
Cute. Yeah, it's cute.
You did.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not like the big riders we use in the grocery stores. They're just little cute little machines. And everybody thinks you got to go battery now. Well, listen, the weight of these little machines, and in a residential home, electric is more than enough that you need. Jim knows which machine I'm talking about.
I
We've used
do.
it together in seminars, and yeah, they're phenomenal, and they're just that good.
All
A
right.
lot of times with resilient floor and the haze issue, less is more. And a lot of times we overthink this, and let's just use the universal solvent and try that first before
You
we
gotta
go.
tell them what that is, Jim.
No, don't tell him. Don't tell him.
But when I get to a home, I train the homeowner how to properly microfiber flat mop. Microfibers require a third less cleaning solution than any string mop ever will. If you drown out your microfiber mop, it's not going to work correctly. It works better with less chemical. And these people are just piling this stuff on the floor. So do your customers a favor when you get there, look at their equipment that they're doing, make suggestions on what product to use, and train them how to properly mop that floor, and then upsell them on auto scrubbing it.
And buy lots of that universal solvent.
Yes.
Measure your product. Measure your product, and don't use dirty water to clean. You got to dump that dirty water out. Keep
Yes.
your water fresh. There's an old story. You can't clean something with something that's dirtier than what you're trying to clean.
Yeah, that's
Keep your
true.
water clear.
Okay, how about one more question, then we're gonna wrap it up. It's another safety question. How concerned should we be about residues that may get into breathing spaces? And I think it's like cleaning and there's,
I can tell you, you should be very concerned. You know, one of the saddest stories of all is the lack of education we have for our frontline workers, especially on the cleaning side. And obviously with GBAC and Dr. Gavin, you know, you guys are working hard to address those things, but you know, any chemistry or whatever, dust, dander, you name it, is all aerosoled at that 4 to 5 foot category. Things don't just disappear. We've finally learned that after, you know, all these years in the cleaning industry. They do not go away. So we need to be doing our best to make sure to capture, remediate, and sequester those products.
Chances are, if there's something in there, it's not good for you. I would just mention too that the IICRC has a new health and safety technician course, and they also have an excellent field guide on safety for professional cleaners. And it's just an excellent manual for training and getting information on in an easy way relative to the safety of doing your work.
I feel spraying products to clean floors is not the safest way to go about it. You atomize the cleaning chemical. It's under 5 microns in size. We can't filter those out, and we breathe those in. We get deeply embedded into our lungs. So many of my students will say, oh, I spray on the cleaner to do my tile and grout cleaning. I spray on my stripper to do this. I spray on my sealer to do that. And if you're not wearing the right facial protection, you're going to be breathing all that stuff in, and it's not healthy. Furthermore, it sits in the atmosphere for days on end and can literally go through the air handling system. I'm sure people can attest to how they've stripped the floor on Friday, and on Monday they're complaining about how the place still smells. So don't spray products. Remember when the ISSA wanted us to go to flip top containers for cleaning restroom to avoid spraying, right? Well, that never took off, but the concept and the sincerity of trying to protect the cleaner was there. But so don't spray products. That's my tip.
good tips. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here today, our panelists. I think we need to put Ray DeMayo on payroll because he's been answering questions in the chat as well.
Ray's
Ray,
awesome.
I know Ray from the past. He's a good guy. Thank you, Ray, for helping. But you know, this is what it's all about. It's not just about listening to us talk, but the chat, the commenting going on there is great. So share ideas. Ray will reach out to everyone. Ray will provide his contact information probably. So
After you give
reach out to me. Anyone that wants to reach out to Ray, you can get to him through me if you don't know how to get to Ray. So thank you, Ray. We've talked about Ray enough, but thank everyone for being here today at our webinar, and we'll see you at the next one.
And at the ISSA show in November.
There you go.
All right. Thank
Thanks
you,
a lot,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Yep,
Thanks
bye
for your
now.
comments.